the light of the world. John chapter 8, verses 1 to 20.
Brother Chairman, to my dear brethren and sisters and young people. Well, I do apologise, brethren and sisters, for the interruptions from time to time to our class, because I know how taxing that is on your memory, but we do hope we can pick up the threads of the memory this evening and carry on with this story of the Lord's life in a most dramatic incident, of course, here, which has revealed to us tonight in the light of the world. Now, you remember that when he came down from Galilee, Luke says he set his face steadfastly to go towards Jerusalem after the transfiguration, of course. And we entered into the period of the last 6 months of his life. And although it's true, brethren and sisters, that he made a circuitous route around Jerusalem a couple of times before, of course, he was crucified, this was really, the time had come now to really set his face to that city, that even though he made that circuitous route around Jerusalem once or twice, the vortex was there and had to be faced. And the time had come now to steel himself for that last grim 6 months of his life. And we saw him, did we not, come down in the middle of that feast of the tabernacles, which was the joyous feast in Israel, and of course accompanied by so much celebration and the pageantry of that feast. And everybody loved to go to this feast. And all the world, of course, the Jewish world that is, wondered when he would appear there and what he would say at that feast, because that was the opportunity, of course, to say many things. We saw, did we not, brethren and sisters, that when he came, there were a multitude of opinions about him, and all sorts of rumours were floating around that city. And we saw, of course, the wonderful ceremony of the carrying of the water from the pool of Siloam, and where it was taken into the temple amidst the acclamations of joy of, let us draw salvation from the wells of salvation, and so forth. And we saw the wonder of that when Jesus stood up and said, "He that thirsteth, let him come to me and drink." And so he drew attention to that great ceremony and directed attention to himself through that ceremony. And we're going to consider this evening, brethren and sisters, the second great custom of that feast which they had, which we will describe in a moment. But it was during the course of the feast and immediately afterwards that John records some of the most profound discussions which Jesus had both with the Jews and with the Pharisees on these occasions. Not easy to follow, brethren and sisters. Not easy at all. But John writes with great profundity. We need to read between the lines to get the gist of the argument, and you need to concentrate, because there are some wonderful things here which the Lord Jesus Christ taught concerning himself and his relationship to his Father. And we are the richer if we can understand even some of the things that he said. Now you'll notice that in verse 12, which really is our subject for this evening, that we read there in verse 12, "Then spake Jesus again unto them." In other words, it was a series of discussions, because he's going to speak again. And this discussion about the light of the world comes after the interruption of when they brought that woman taken in adultery, which is recorded in the first 11 verses of John. You see, you read in verses 1 and 2 that Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. So you see, it was a series of teachings and discussions there. So when John 8 verse 12 says he spoke again to them, it's immediately after the interruption of that woman that was taken in adultery, of course, which interrupted those discourses. And now he's going to return to them. You know, brethren and sisters, the measure of their hypocrisy concerning that woman surely must be in this fact that they brought her to the temple to do what they did with her. To the temple, mark you. And there in the midst of that holy place, which should have been holy, they would enact that dreadful scene, which of course in the end turned to their own shame and confusion. But what's this discussion about? Well, you see, at the end of chapter 7, there was a discussion with the Sanhedrin concerning him. They got together to talk about what they're going to do about him, and there was quite a heated discussion there as to what was going to happen, because Nicodemus had put in his little bit and had caused some dissension among them. And then in verse 52 they answered and said unto him, Art thou also of Galilee? Search and look, for out of Galilee ariseth no prophet. and every man went into his own house. And I believe that when John 8 verse 12 says he spoke to them again, he's going to draw attention to that conclusion that they come to, because he would have heard about it, brothers and sisters, and he would have known that that discussion broke up with the view that no prophet ariseth out of Galilee. Well, what about Isaiah 9? What did Isaiah 9 say? The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. And they that dwelt in the region of the shadow of death, upon them hath light shined. I am the light of the world. And that light, said Isaiah, was going to shine in Galilee of the nations. No prophet ariseth out of Galilee. Brothers and sisters, such was the prophecy of Isaiah 9. It wasn't only that a prophet was to arise, he was to rise in the brilliance of the sun. Goodness me, said the Lord. No prophet out of Galilee. Why, that great light was to throw a tremendous ray of light into Galilee. Galilee of the nations. I am that light of the world, he said. And I believe that's why he chose this particular discussion to open it up like that, because that was the question. Now, brothers and sisters, this discussion was also, of course, projected into his mind because of what went on at that time, or rather during the course of the feast. The feast is over now. Verse 53 of chapter 7 said that every man went to his own home. They're no longer dwelling in booths together in Jerusalem. The feast is all over, because on the last day, the great day of the feast, he spoke about the living water. So it's all over now. But during the course of that feast, brothers and sisters, the other great custom they had on that during the feast was that they used to light these 4 great lampstands in the 4 corners of the court of the women. Each of those lampstands had 4 great lights. So there were 16 lights. And they lit them at the corners of the court of the women. Now I want to show you where that is, because this is very interesting indeed. Now here is a transparency of Herod's temple. This is the whole area, of course, with the Mount of Olives over on this to the east here. And here, of course, are the courts that surrounded the temple itself, which was in the middle. This is the royal court along here, and along the eastern side was Solomon's porch. But in the centre here is Herod's temple proper. And the court of the women was there. It was the big court through which you came through the gate, beautiful here, into the court of the women. Now that's showing it in its general sense. Here is a more detailed look at that temple. And you'll see where the court of the women was. So here's the gate, beautiful, facing the east. You come up these steps here into the court of the women. Then there was the court of the men, or of Israel, then the court of the priests, and then of course the holy place and the most holy place itself. Now it was in the court of the women, brothers and sisters, that you might say was the general congregation area. That's where the people congregated, in the court of the women. Called that because women were not permitted beyond that point. And because it was the largest of the courts, this is where people generally congregated in the temple. This is where most of the discussions the Lord had would have taken place, in the court of the women. And it was in the corners of that court that during the course of the feast, after the day's activities, that they burnt in those corners those great lampstands. And so great was the light, brothers and sisters, that it threw light over the whole city and lit up the whole of Jerusalem. They used to gather all the old garments of the priests. When they were partially worn out, they'd get these garments and they would use them as the great wicks and soak them in oil and put them in these lamps. And it blazed up the whole city. And do you know what they said that was prefiguring? They quoted Isaiah 60. Arise and shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of Yahweh is risen upon thee, and the Gentiles shall come to thy light. That's what they said. And Jesus said, I am that light. I am the light of the world, he says. The Gentiles shall come to thy light. Now, how do we know it was in the court of the women? Well, we know that in verse 20. These words spake Jesus in the treasury. And somewhere in the court of the women, brothers and sisters, was the 13 trumpet-shaped casks into which the people threw their arms. And of course, it's well noted fact that they were in the court of the women. And this, of course, fits the whole scene so well because that's where they put the great lights, that's where the treasury was, and that was the public place where most of the people congregated in the temple area. And so it's extremely interesting. As we'll see a little bit later on, there was something there also, which will come up later, and you'll see why it is that John makes that point, that it was in that particular place that this incident took place. Now, you remember that when we talked about that water being brought to the pool of Siloam and poured out upon the altar, that the main thing it symbolised rather, was the water coming out of the rock in Exodus 17. Remember that? And we made the point that Jesus said that out of his belly would flow rivers of living water, that he was that rock. Well, when they put these 4 great candelabras in the corner of the court of the women, yes, it was to show that Jerusalem's glory would come and the Gentiles would come to see her light. But the main thing, brothers and sisters, that was being symbolised there was the pillar of fire that led Israel in the wilderness. The pillar of fire. And that was the main thing they were trying to show, that as God led them in the evening by the pillar of fire, so in the evenings they went down there and they organised some wonderful festivities. There were men of the separation down there who used to form their teams and sing in the choirs, and the women would dance, and there was all sorts of wonderful, joyous festivities as they saw that God was leading them by the pillar of fire. Or they ought to have seen that, but of course it was a hollow and a mockery, really, the way that they kept it. But that's what it was supposed to symbolise. And there it was that our Lord Jesus Christ drew attention to himself as the light of the world. And it's rather interesting, he did that when the feast was over. And he would have gone down to the court of the women. And in the gloom of the evening, that would have been noticed that there was no light there. The feast was over. And when there was no light, he drew his attention, brethren and sisters, to the real light that's in this world. And the discourse that followed had to do not with physical glory, but with moral glory. And that is, of course, far greater and far more wonderful and illuminating than all the physical glory in the world. This light that he claimed to be, brethren and sisters, was the light of the world that would not have been missed by the Jews. And although, of course, they saw that Zion was to be wonderfully illuminated in the future age, and the Gentiles would come to see that light. It's another thing to say that I am the light of the world. And they understood that, brethren and sisters, to be a claim to his messiahship. And it would have been somewhat offensive to them to consider that Messiah could ever have said that in a Jewish sanctuary. Rather, leave that for later on, as far as they were concerned. He was the glory of Israel, was he not? Never mind about talking about the Gentiles. Well, you listen to these words that are recorded in Luke chapter 2. When Simeon came into the temple to take that babe in his arms who was destined to be the light of the world, look what he said. He quoted the prophecy of Isaiah. Look at the words that he uses, brethren and sisters. Verse 28 of Luke chapter 2, when Simeon lifted up the child, he took him up in his arms and blessed God and said, Lord, now lettest thy servant depart in peace according to thy word. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people, a light to lighten the Gentiles and the glory of thy people of Israel. You think about what that means, brethren and sisters. A light to lighten the Gentiles and the glory of the people of Israel. Well, you reverse that order. See what Simeon is saying? He's a light that will lighten the Gentile world. But he's the glory of the people of Israel. The glory of the people of Israel was hidden in there. Nobody saw it. And you see the parallels? He's a light to the Gentiles and the glory of the people of Israel. And look at the contrast. When the glory of thy people of Israel was hidden in that most holy place where nobody could see it, But when he comes to be a light of the Gentiles, brothers and sisters, the whole Jerusalem will be lit up in light, won't it? And so Simeon chose his words very carefully. Mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which shall be to all people, a light to lighten the Gentiles, even though he is the glory of thy people of Israel. And the Shekinah glory shining between the cherubim was but, brothers and sisters, prefiguring the day when God would shine through the world. And Jesus was making stupendous claims in the court of the women when he talked about himself as being the light of the world. You look at these prophecies in Isaiah 42, and the Jews understood these in measure. They understood that Messiah would come, that he would be a light to the Gentiles. And these prophecies were very clear. And this is the prophecy that Simeon quoted, brethren and sisters. Isaiah 42 and verse 6. I, Yahweh, have called thee in righteousness, and will hold thine hand, and will keep thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light to the Gentiles. Isaiah 49, for example. And again in verse 6 of that chapter. There were the prophecies that this light would light up the whole world. And so in Isaiah 49 and verse 6, and he said, it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the ends of the earth. And again, that prophecy, of course, is included in the words of Simeon, the aged prophet in Jerusalem. And it was the Apostle Paul who before Agrippa said that the Lord Jesus Christ was the one who arrested him on the way to Damascus, whom he said he would give light to them that dwelt in darkness, and that he would illuminate the world through the gospel message that God would bring in him. And so you see, brethren and sisters, there was a lot in what the Lord Jesus Christ was saying in making that wonderful statement, I am the light of the world. And as they stood there in the court of the women with only that recent memory of the illumination of the whole place, how wonderful those words would have rang in the ears of those who had any understanding of what he was saying. And when you come back to John chapter 8, bearing in mind that these words have and are applicable to the pillar of fire that led them in the wilderness, look what Jesus next says, brothers and sisters. Think about that pillar of fire that led them in the wilderness. And Jesus makes these 2 points about that fire. He says in that 8th chapter in verse 12 again, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness. Now, no, brothers and sisters, when it says shall not walk, the words in the Greek are an extremely strong negation. We read it like this. He that follows me shall by no means ever walk in darkness. Never could he walk in darkness if he follows me. That's the point that he's making. Now we won't turn these references up, but you'll find them in one chapter. But in the 9th chapter of Nehemiah, when Nehemiah talked about that pillar of fire, among other things, he said these 2 things about it. He said it was to go before them, to show them the way wherein they would go. He that followeth me. And then Nehemiah said, he said that in the 9th chapter in verse 12. And then in verse 19 he said, and the pillar of cloud departed not from them. By no means could they walk in darkness if they followed that fire, because it did not depart from them. But the Lord was telling them, you see those great lampstands as being like pillars of fire? Follow them. And when you do, you will by no means walk in darkness. Because those things, the pillars of fire, did not depart from them. Now there's a very great lesson in that, brothers and sisters. You might think, well, that's simple. It is. But you know, there's a great moral obligation in those words. This is what the Lord was trying to tell them. You see, it is John in his epistle, which we were so privileged to listen to on the weekend, and I say privileged. It was a wonderful weekend. I was never more lifted up than I was on the weekend. I thought it was absolutely marvellous. And it was John in that epistle, brethren and sisters, that said concerning God, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. Now, we've got light in this room, but there are shadows. There are pockets of darkness behind the curtain, or whatever. You couldn't say that in this room there is no darkness at all. There's a little bit of darkness here and there. In God, brethren and sisters, there is no darkness at all. That's why James makes this point. And this is the point the Lord's making. In James chapter 1, he makes this point. And this is the moral lesson of what Jesus is getting at. He shall by no means walk in darkness if he follows me. And James makes this point in chapter 1 and verse 13. He said, let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God is untemptable. That's what the Greek word says. God is untemptable. Therefore he doesn't tempt any man, says James. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. That when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And sin, when it's grown up, brings forth death. Don't make any mistakes, my beloved brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variableness, neither shadow cast by turning. What James is saying is if you have any object at all, it will cast a shadow. Somewhere it will cast a shadow. Well, he says God can turn 360 degrees and never cast a shadow. Don't make any mistakes by blaming God for your faults, because if you follow in his footsteps, you shall by no means walk in darkness. There's no way that anyone could be in proximity with God through his Son that could ever walk in darkness. You will by no means do that. So, brethren and sisters, when we do walk in darkness, we have moved away. That's the point the Lord is making. I am the light of the world. If there's darkness around here, he says, it's got nothing to do with me. You will by no means walk in darkness if you follow me. Therefore, brethren and sisters, the blame for walking in darkness has got nothing to do with God. Jesus told Nicodemus, men loved darkness because their deeds were evil. They chose to walk out of the light into the darkness. They could never have done that had they stayed near the light, because it doesn't cast any shadow at all, though the object may turn. There's no shadow anywhere. And that, of course, brothers and sisters, is not concerning the natural world, because in the natural world, in the most brilliant of lights, there's shadow somewhere. None here. And that's what he's saying. He will by no means ever walk in darkness, providing he follows me. And that's what Nehemiah said. The way that you will go, and it'll never depart from you. So if Israel went into darkness, it's because they walked away from the pillar of fire. That's what happened. No good blaming that. And that's the point that the Lord is making in this place. And then he goes on to say something quite incredible, brethren and sisters, in that 8th chapter of John, as he commences this discourse now, and he's really speaking to the Pharisees here. And in the 8th chapter of John, he said that men would by no means walk in darkness, but he says in the end of verse 12, but shall have the light of life. The light of life. Now, you will find every one of John's themes are repeated in his gospel message. They're all over the place, but they keep getting repeated. Now, what is this life, the light of life? What's that? Well, you might say that's simple. It's the life which leads to the light. But see, back in chapter 1, this is a theme that John opened his gospel with, isn't it? Look what he says here. Now, you read carefully. He's talking about that which was in the beginning. And he's talking about, brothers and sisters, that which was before the world was made. And before the world was ever made, there was the Word of God. And he goes on to say in verse 3, all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Now listen carefully. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. Now you think, well, so what? Well, haven't you noticed? That's the opposite to Genesis. That's the other way around. Because the world, the globe, was in darkness, wasn't it? It was enshrouded in darkness. Darkness covered the face of the deep. And there was no light until, first of all, there was light. And the light preceded the life, but not here. It's the life that's the light of men. It's the other way around. Because when God made the physical world, needed light to bring life. But John's not talking about God making the physical world. He's talking about that which was from the beginning, before the physical world was made. And he's not talking about the physical world either. He's talking about the moral world. And if they needed light to bring physical life, before ever there can be eternal life, brothers and sisters, light, there's got to be life preceding that. And that life is the light of men. It's not the light which leads to the life, it's the life which leads to the light. And if we didn't have the life of the Son of God, we wouldn't have any light. So he was before that light which illuminated the world for life to come. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word was embodied in human form. It became flesh. And we saw his glory. John's not talking about a pre-existent Christ. He didn't believe in the pre-existent Christ. He didn't believe in the second person of the Trinity. But he believed, brothers and sisters, that before the world ever was, there was life with God. And that life was expressed in his Word. The Word itself had propounded the wonderful truth that it would become embodied in his Son. But when it did become embodied, there was the life. Now we've got light, the light of men. That's what Jesus meant. Before the world was, he had a glory with the Father. And the life was the light of men. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that absolutely wonderful, brothers and sisters? And it needed that perfect life to come, to do two things really. Number one, to dispel darkness, because that's what light does. You get to a dark room, turn the switch on, darkness flees, and enables men to be illuminated, to see where they're going. And that light in this case was a life. It was a life. And that's how precious, brothers and sisters, that life is. Now this was not lost on the Pharisees. Come back to John chapter 8. What he was driving at was not lost on them. Not entirely, that is. The main lesson was, but they could see in part what he was driving at. So in verse 13, they say to him, the Pharisees therefore said unto him, Thou bearest record of thyself, thy record's not true. Now the word record there, brothers and sisters, is in Rotherham's translation and in other good translation, the RSV and so forth, turned into the word witness. And that's the better word. The Pharisees therefore said unto him, Thou bearest witness of thyself, thy witness is not true. Now they are quoting his own words. They are directing his own words at him. Now you have a look at them, just back a few pages in John chapter 5. When Jesus had said on a previous visit to Jerusalem, which they had never forgotten, this is the remarkable thing here, there are some 18 months between these events, but they'd never forgotten them. And in John chapter 5 and verse 31, Jesus said, If I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. Now you picture the scene. Why are they saying this, you see? What's witness got to do with it? Well, you see, brothers and sisters, it's because the Jews believed that when Messiah was come, one of his titles would be the light of the world. They knew what he was on about. partly that is. They knew that implicit in those words was a claim for messiahship. So what would seem here to be out of context is not really. We can see what you're up to. You're witnessing that you're the Messiah. Well, you said yourself. You said. But if there's only one witness, and if the witness is just yourself, it's not true. You said that, they said to him. You know what they were doing, brothers and sisters? The one writer says they were standing in the day wanting formal proof that the sun was shining. They couldn't see it in him. They couldn't see it. But it was there for all eyes to see. Now what's Jesus going to answer to that question? Because they are his own words. What is his answer to that? Well, you see, brothers and sisters, it goes like this. He said in verse 14, Jesus answered and said unto them, though I bear record of myself. Now, the personal pronoun here is very emphatic. He's saying this. Even if I bear record of myself, it's still true. Now what did he mean? Because previously he said, if I bear record of myself, it's not true. Can you imagine the Pharisees saying to him, and we wouldn't have all the record here. They say, yeah, but that's not what you said before. What he said that he would turn to him and say, now look, I'm telling you, even though I do, it's still true. Which would to them seem to be a contradiction. What Jesus meant earlier was that if he came into this world like ordinary men come into this world, like every other man comes into this world, being born of an earthly father and an earthly mother, and if he bore witness of himself as a mere man, then it's not true. But here's the difficulty that he's got. This is the difficulty the Lord's got, you see. You listen carefully. They were claiming evidence, brethren and sisters, of a truth for which there could not possibly be a human witness. You see? And Jesus is measuring that off. Yes, he would say to them, if I were a mere man, my witness would not be true. That's what I said to you. But I'm not a mere man. And they were asking him for witness to a truth for which there never could be a human witness. Why? Why? Simple. Exceedingly simple. What was necessary for anyone to be a witness to the veracity of the claims of another? We know what it is in Acts chapter 1. You have a look at it. When the disciples were called upon to be a witness of his resurrection, they had to have certain qualifications. What was that? Well, in Acts chapter 1, verses 21 and 22, Peter spells out those qualifications. He says, wherefore of these men which have accompanied us all the time that the Lord Jesus went in and out among us, beginning from the baptism of John unto the same day that he was taken up from us, must one be ordained to be a witness with us of his resurrection. In other words, brethren and sisters, you imagine what it would be if Peter went and got a man to be the 12th apostle after the demise of Judas Iscariot. And the man had never known Jesus, never seen him in his lifetime. And they brought him forth to be a witness. And they would say, now, you're a witness of the resurrection of Christ. Yes, I'm a witness. Did you see him after he rose? Yes, I did. Was it the same man that you knew before? And he's, well, I don't know. He wouldn't know. Because he'd never seen him before, see? How could you be a witness of the resurrection of Mr. A if you'd never known him in his mortal life? You couldn't. You'd have to know the man then and know him now. Otherwise you are not an accredited witness. Now, have you got that point? Get that very carefully in your head. So that Peter could be a witness. He was with the Lord. They'd say, you seen him after his resurrection? Yes, I did. Was it the same man? My word it was. Too right it was. I know full well who it was. I saw him both sides of the grave. All right, you're an accredited witness. Now here are these Pharisees saying, hey, you said if you bear witness alone, it's not true. And Jesus is saying, I'm telling you now, even though I bear witness alone, it's still true. Why is it? Well, you come back to John chapter 8 and see why it is. And this is why there could be no human witness. They couldn't have the proof they wanted. It was impossible. And here's the reason. Verse 14 again. Jesus answered and said unto them, though I bear record of myself, my record is true, for I know whence I came, and whither I go. But you cannot tell whence I come, and whither I go. See the point? And so Jesus was telling them, I know where I've come from, and I know where I'm going to finish. He knows both sides of it. He knows his origin and his destiny. He is an accredited witness, but nobody else could know that. And how could they ever believe it? Unless they could see in him the light of the world. Because the proof, brethren and sisters, that he was from God was in his life. See? No good quoting the Bible theoretically, because that's light, true. But all that light would do on this occasion was to point out the Messiah would come. The light would say he would come. But the life says he's here. See the point? Go over that again. Open up the Bible and quote messianic prophecies to say the Messiah would come. But the life that's standing in front of them is absolute proof that he's already here. He's come from down that direction, and he's going to that direction. He knows both sides of it. He is an accredited witness. And at that stage in life, brothers and sisters, it was absolutely impossible to produce a human witness like it, because there just wasn't any to produce. And how did he know? You know, again and again in John's Gospel, he repeats that point about Jesus knowing his origin and knowing his destiny. You look how many times he does it. Chapter 7 and verse 29. But I know him, for I am from him, and he hath sent me. Verse 42 of chapter 8. Then said Jesus unto them, if God were your Father, ye would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Chapter 13, brothers and sisters, and verse 3. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was from God, he was come from God and went to God. Origin and destiny. Chapter 16 and verse 28. I came forth from the Father and am come into the world. Again I leave the world and go to my Father. So look at the emphasis that is on the fact that Jesus knew of his origin. Now, brothers and sisters, it's not enough to say that he knew of his origin because the Bible said he would come. That would not make him an accredited witness, because the Bible said that Jeremiah would come. The Bible said that Paul would come. The Bible said that John the Baptist would come. There was a man sent from God whose name was John, but he wasn't an accredited witness like this man. None of them ever came into the world like Jesus did. And you see, brothers and sisters, there's something here that's far beyond the comprehension of mortal man in its totality. Here's one of whom it was said that he was God's son, who was born in an extraordinary manner, whose predilection towards spiritual things, brothers and sisters, was to us incomprehensible, who Isaiah says actually breathed with God, that God breathed out the spirit of wisdom, the spirit of counsel, the spirit of might and so forth, ruach, to breathe out, and made him of quick understanding, ruach, to breathe in. He was one who breathed with his Father through the Bible. But as he grew up, he had the proof in himself by his own attitude of mind, by the things which he was able to find in the Word of God, that he had a relationship with the Father that no other man had, that he'd been there, and he was going there. And he says, you want a witness? I'm your witness. You could never be a witness to that. Now you see, there's his witness. But you see, there's still a problem, isn't there? There's a very big problem, brothers and sisters, you see, because we've still only got seemingly one witness. There's got to be at least two. Now you look what he goes on and says. He said to them in verse 15, "You judge after the flesh. I judge no man." Now you see what he's saying there, brothers and sisters, is that they looked at him and they saw Jesus of Nazareth. They saw him as a man, a mere man, making a claim to be a witness on his own, when the law of Moses clearly said you have to have at least two, better three, but at least two, and he's on his own. But Jesus said, you can't understand why I'm an accredited witness because you've got no idea where I came from. I told you that. You can't tell where I come from or where I go, but I know that. And you see, brothers and sisters, what they could never see, what Jesus was telling them, that there was one voice to a double witness. Because he wasn't witnessing on his own behalf only. He was speaking for himself and for his Father. And they never could see that in the one voice. But that's what was happening. And so they judged after the flesh by external appearances only. If they'd have listened to his words, listened to his teaching, it's like he told them earlier, the words that I speak are not mine. Can't you understand that? Whoever could talk about the Bible like this? Where do you think this is coming from? It was the Father talking in his Son. It was one voice and two witnesses. Are you going to go and show them that in a minute? He said, I judge no man. And you see, here was the remarkable thing. You look at the way this is confronted up. Look at the wonder of this mind. And it comes out earlier in John. This is an expansion of an earlier theme. See, what happened here was there was this group of people and this man here. They looked at him and assessed everything according to the flesh. That is, external appearances. Where he was born, he was another man like any other man and so forth. They didn't get beyond that. And in their external judgment of it, they condemned him. Now on the other hand, here's a man that sees through them like they were liquid, clear liquid, as if water, transparent, saw right through them. He had a spiritual insight that nobody had and didn't condemn them. He would be far better equipped to do it, would he not? But he didn't. Their purpose in seeing things external was to judge him. And his purpose in seeing things internal was to convince them of the truth of what he was saying. He was better equipped to judge than what they were. But he didn't do it. But you know what he said in the next verse? And yet, if I judge, my judgment is true. Now you say, hang on. On the one hand he says, I don't judge. But he said, but if I do judge, it's true. That's a contradiction, isn't it? No. Because you see, what he's saying there, brothers and sisters, is this. That he didn't judge me. He didn't condemn anybody at all in that sense. But you see, men were self-condemned because they're standing in the light. And the light revealed them for what they were. Now here's the wonderful thing about God. God is the judge of all the world. God will bring men into judgment. God will condemn them to eternal death. God will obliterate the wicked from the whole universe. But he never ever intended to do that. It was never his intention. But it'll happen. Why? Because of men's own choosing. You come back to John chapter 3. You look at it. You just have a look at the way it's put. It's wonderful, brothers and sisters. I mean, if we could only grasp this principle, how much better we'd be in life. God's intention with the world is in verse 16. He loved it. There's his intention. And not only did he love it, and not only was his intention to save it, why? It was so great that he gave his only begotten Son. That was God's intention, backed up by the death of his own child. What an incredible proof of his intention. So Jesus said in verse 17, God did not send his Son into the world to condemn it. That was not the point. He sent his Son to the world might be saved. Well, why aren't they saved? Well, Jesus said, he that believeth on him is not condemned, But he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the condemnation, that light is come. Light has come. I'm the light of the world. So he says, I'm not judging anyone. I'm not condemning anyone. But if I do, it's a true judgment. Why? Because I've brought light. I want to enlighten you. But if the light shows you up for what you are, and you walk away and hide in a corner in the darkness, that's your problem. God's intention is to love you and to save you. So he said, if I judge, my judgment is true, because the light has come. And men love darkness rather than light. I didn't want them to do that. And they walked out of the light into the darkness. That was never my intention. Isn't that wonderful, brethren and sisters? You know, if you went away with that point only tonight and sat down and thought that through and got it into your head and my head that we've got to be godlike in our attitude, what a marvellous attitude that is. We may be in some situations in a better position to judge others. We may have a more perfect assessment of situations. We may be in the possession of greater knowledge of people's misdemeanours. What we could say maybe could never be gainsaid. But what is our purpose? For what are we called for? What would God have me to do? To be like his Son. I'm not here to condemn anybody. But if what we say condemns people, that's their problem. But let's not, brothers and sisters, make that assessment and judgment because we know better. Let us do what Jesus did. Shed light that men might see where they're going. The choice is theirs. Beautiful, isn't it? That's what he's telling them. Now he says in verse 16 of John chapter 8, my judgment is true, he said, because I'm not alone. You see, I'm not an individual witness. He knew what they were thinking. He knew they were saying to themselves, what on earth is this chap talking about? You know, I know where I came from and I know where I'm going. Well, they think to themselves, well, I came from such and such a village up in Galilee and I'm going back there. I know where I came from, where I went to. What on earth is he talking about? And in the back of their minds all the time, they're thinking to themselves, hey, listen, whatever he says, whatever it might mean, we don't understand what he's talking about, he's still only one witness. He said, I'm not really. I'm not alone. There are two witnesses. It's the Father is with me. He's with me. Now, brethren and sisters, as I said before, as that writer said, they were standing in the day demanding a formal proof that the sun was shining. Who wouldn't have known that the Father was with him? Look, there were people who heard the audible voice on the banks of the River Jordan. This is my beloved Son, he whom I'm well pleased. God made a declaration to everybody. This is him. Look at the Mount of Transfiguration. Oh yes, there wouldn't be too many people heard about that, but 3 disciples at least did and could testify to that. And if people did not hear the voice on the banks of the Jordan, if they didn't know about the Transfiguration, look at the miracles. Why, there were men, women and children everywhere who were caused to be full of life and health because of him. And if they couldn't understand the miracles, listen to the exposition of the word. Who on earth is with him? Who is behind all this? Brothers and sisters, you'd have to be blind, wouldn't you? I am not alone, but the Father which hath sent me. And then taking the words right out of their mouth. Because they were going to say to him about the law, weren't they? Well, he didn't let them get it. He said, it's written in your law. Your law! He knew what they were going to say. They were waiting for a chance for to chip in and say, yeah, but in the Bible it says you've got to have 2 or 3 witnesses. He knew that. And before they could say it, he puts the words in their mouth. It's written in your law. He doesn't mean to speak disparaging of the law, brethren and sisters, because elsewhere he put the law on the highest plane. What he means by your law is their interpretation and use of it. Even when they'd interpreted rightly, it was still their bad use of it. And their use of it made him a transgressor. So it was their law. Because God's law never made him a transgressor. It had to be theirs, didn't it? If you've got a law which vindicates him in God's view, and you make him a transgressor, then it's your law. Not speaking disparagingly of God's law. He's talking about the way they misused it. And the misuse, the proof of it is that they said he was a transgressor. That makes it their law, not God's. See the point? Now he says, it's written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. Brothers and sisters, it's not written in their law like that at all. Oh, what a master stroke this is. It's not written like that at all. If you look up in your leisure the 17th chapter of Deuteronomy and verse 6 and the 19th chapter of Deuteronomy and verse 15, it doesn't say that. It says this. It says, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall everything be established. He said, it's written in your law that the testimony of 2 men is true. You know what he's doing? Changing witnesses to men, 2 men, because the testimony of their law was in the mouth of 2 men. He said, my witness is in the mouth of 2 personalities and not normal men. See the point? Myself and my Father is not 2 men. The witness that he's got, brothers and sisters, is greater than the law. He doesn't have to match the law. His witness is matchless. You took the 1st of John chapter 5 and verse 9. Look at this. Isn't this what the same writer, when he wrote his epistle, said? Doesn't he pick this up again? Reading from verse 7 and leaving out, of course, the words which are an interpolation, picking it up midway between verse 8. We read verse 7, for there are 3 that bear record or witness, and beginning in the middle of verse 8, the Spirit, the water and the blood, and these 3 all agree to one thing. If we receive the witness of men, the witness of God is greater. For this is the witness of God, which he has testified of his Son. So it's God and his Son against the witness of men. It's written in your law that the testimony of 2 men. But it didn't say that. It said witnesses. Of course they were men, and no doubt about that. But that's why the Lord put men there, because the witness of God is greater, brothers and sisters. And what was the witness here? What was it? Well, there are not 2 things, 3. Why, there's the Spirit, there's the water, and the blood, and they all agree to one thing. What was it that they agreed to? What was the one thing that 3 added up to? Search the scriptures and you'll find out. Moses took Aaron to make him the high priest, washed him with water, touched his thumb and his ear and his toe with blood, and poured oil on his head as a symbol of the Spirit. Made him high priest, whose testimony in Israel from one voice was on behalf of 2 personalities. Himself and the God that he represented. Spirit, water and blood agree to the fact that he's God's representative. That's Leviticus chapter 8. Washed him in water, touched him with blood, and poured oil on his head as a symbol of the Spirit. And Jesus upon the cross, brothers and sisters, out of his side came water and blood. And 3 days later, Spirit was added. What for? To agree to one thing. But there's one at the right hand of the Father who speaks for the 2 of them. The witness of men is one thing. The witness of God is greater. And it's not the witness of God and Jesus Christ as 2 individuals. It's the witness of God and his Son. Father and Son. They would never have comprehended that. No way would they have seen the profundity of that argument, brothers and sisters. As Jesus said, you'll never understand that. Because you don't know my origins like I do. And you don't know my destiny like I do. One voice, 2 witnesses. 2 men. As against my Father and I. Incredible, isn't it? And they would have stood there, brothers and sisters, unable to understand the least of that. Because they were not spiritually minded. They judged after the flesh. So let's come back then and have a look what the rest of this chapter has to say. Verse 19, or verse 18, he said, I am one that bear witness of myself, and the Father that sent me beareth witness of me. So there's your witnesses. Then said they unto him, where is thy Father? Not who, but where. So you see, had they said who, it would have implied that they at least believed the possibility that he was making God his Father. No way. They just wanted to know where. In other words, they never even saw the connection between the Father and the Son. They said, where's your Father? Where's he? We understand there's two witnesses needed. You're here. Where's your Father? Where is he? Look what he says, brothers and sisters. Jesus said, you neither know me nor my Father. For if you'd known me, you should have known my Father also. Now you think about that. Look at the way that's put. See, we could have read it, and it would have been not what it said, but he could have said, you neither know my Father nor me. For if you'd known my Father, you would have known me. He could have said it that way. You would have thought he would have put God first, wouldn't you? Isn't that the way you'd have put it? Wouldn't that be the right order? Wouldn't it? No, it wouldn't. Because you see, brothers and sisters, there's only one way God can be known. He can't be known any other way. You can never know God if you don't first know his Son. Because that's the only way that he chose to reveal himself. You think about that. You think of what would have happened to put it back the other way. But he didn't. He repeated like a Hebraism. And here they were rejecting the only way ever to know God. There's no way that they could have got around the Lord and come to know God behind him. And then come back and argue that they knew God. They can't. It's impossible. The only way to know God is through Jesus Christ. There is no other way. I think that's absolutely powerful. When you think about that argument, you think about it, brothers and sisters. Do you know God? How could you ever know him if you didn't know his Son? Because that's the only way he chose to reveal himself. Oh, he revealed himself in the Shekinah glory. He revealed his back parts to Moses. He showed his ways unto Moses and his acts unto the children of Israel. He revealed himself in a multitude of ways, and he was still, brothers and sisters, in a sense, the unknown God. In a sense, I say. Until John said, we've beheld his glory. Now we can see it. It's the glory of the only begotten of the Father. There it is. Now we can see it. Clear as crystal. You can't get back through the Father except that way. Isn't that true? But you think about the emphasis on that. And think that where did that leave them, brothers and sisters, who rejected him and crucified the Lord of glory? And what he said to Philip, Philip, show us the Father, he said. Philip, have not I been so long time with you, and have you not seen the Father? It wasn't only, brothers and sisters, that he showed Philip the Father. The fact of the matter was that Philip would never see the Father unless he saw it that way. That's what God has done. That's the power that's invested in his Son. That's the authority that the Son of Man has to judge. Because you can't come to him and say, I know your Father, but I don't entirely understand you. There's no way you can do that. And it's not because knowing God is to know his Son. It's not like that at all. It's because you can't know the God unless you know his Son. I tell you, brothers and sisters, that is almighty powerful. And the Father chose to remain hidden in symbology, in other types of revelation, where his revelation of his glory was never really clearly seen as it is here. This is the only way. And there's no way around it. And if they only understood the measure of those words, brothers and sisters, my word, they'd have been troubled men that night, wouldn't they? To find they were his enemies, and yet that's the only channel through to God. Incredible, really. These words spake Jesus, says John, in the treasury, as he taught in the temple. Why would he make that point there? As I said earlier, that there's a point about that, isn't it? What did he mention that for? You see, because as I said, the treasury was always understood. All Jewish historians would tell you. Josephus was a contemporary historian, would tell you that the treasury was in the court of the women. That's where he was gathered with them. What's the point he's making? The point is this. Mind you, you want to look up John, say Mark 12:41, Luke 21 verse 1. You'll read that Jesus taught in the treasury. He watched the widow casting their 2 mites and taught in front of everybody there. So it was the public concourse. It was the court of the women, as we know. What's the point? Well, the point is this. That just here, somewhere, just before the court of the men, was the hall and the room wherein the Sanhedrin met, brethren and sisters. They were listening to all this. The end of John chapter 7 says that they were in council, they were in session, talking about that no prophet arrives out of Galilee. He's standing in proximity. There's a crowd outside. They would be in a distance of hearing. They would know what was going on. They could see what was going on. But it says no man laid hands on him, for his hour had not yet come. And when they did lay hands on him, he said to them, when they came into the garden, he said, what are you coming here for? He said, I was ever in the temple. Matthew 26 verse 55. He said, I ever taught in that temple. I taught at your front door. But you didn't touch me. Why didn't they touch him? Why didn't they? And so at the end of the story, brethren and sisters, you know what we've got? We've got the poor wretch of a woman dragged into the court of the women where she should never have been in her state, which was a sacrilege really, where they found 2 witnesses. But they were 2 men. Could have been 3 of them. But they couldn't throw stones. And so he didn't judge the woman, did he? Because their case fell at the foot of their law. All right, the woman's gone. Now they're coming to judge him. They're going to do to him what they did to that woman. But he's got 2 witnesses. And they don't lay hands on him. You know why? Because they can't find fault with the witness. Think about that. So they found fault with the witnesses and their law fell into tatters. And now they can't find fault with the witnesses, the 2 of them, and their law falls in tatters again. Isn't that remarkable? That's why John's got that incident there, brethren and sisters. Isn't that remarkable? And that woman went out of that court with an opportunity, if she wanted it, to be illuminated by the light of the world. Freedom was hers to make a choice. And if she was thankful enough, she would have made that choice. And the inference, in my mind at least, is that she did. I don't know, but that would seem to be the inference of that story. But here are men who were also given a choice, brethren and sisters, and they didn't want to make it, did they? They didn't want to take that. And no man laid hands on him. Why? Because his hour was not yet come. Not theirs. The crucifixion was not their hour at all. He called it on one occasion the power of darkness, their hour and the power of darkness. But in the end, brothers and sisters, the triumph and the victory was not theirs. It was his hour. He would be the one that would choose that. And he would choose it in cooperation with his Father. It was their triumph, their hour, not theirs. And until that come, brethren and sisters, there's nothing they can do about it. Though he was standing right outside the front door, teaching in the light of the day, as the light of the world, ever open, as he said, I was always there. Why didn't you take me then? Because the witness was too great. And even though they didn't understand it, brothers and sisters, the wisdom by which he spake and the power by which he spoke was so irresistible, they couldn't touch him. You know, it's wonderful, isn't it? And I really think it's great to stand in that concourse and listen to those arguments and to grasp the significance of them and the drift of the argument and to see where he's going. And in doing that, brothers and sisters, I just feel in myself that we're coming to grips with the power of this man and the wonder of the way in which that mind worked and the way he thought, which is so different. I mean, the things that I've discovered here, telling you tonight, is nothing that I would have ever thought that record meant like that. But that's how it unfolded as we went through it, verse by verse. And, you know, it really gives me a great thrill. And on the weekend, you know, when we came together, I just would find it difficult to be able to convey to you my feelings, and perhaps the same may be in reverse for you to me. But when Max was talking on Sunday morning about we shall see him as he is, I knew exactly what he was saying. I could see precisely what John was saying there. That it's not a question, brothers and sisters, of just saying, well, we're going to see what he looks like. Why, John knew that. John knew that. He'd been with him for all that time. It wasn't a question of that at all. It's seeing him as he is. That you understand him. Oh, we might be afraid of him. We will be afraid of him. We'll be awestruck. And we will remember, brothers and sisters, our failings, and we will be ashamed of them. And there will be certain trepidations and fears in our heart. But above all else, we know him. We do know him. We know how he thinks. And we love the way he thinks. And because we see him as he is, and we enter into that spirit of his teaching, even though we may not always do it, but we enter into the spirit of it and we would believe it. What is that? But a witness in here, right in there, telling me and you that you are a son of God. Because that's what he wants. It's like going overseas and you meet people for the first time, never seen them before in your life. And in about 5 or 10 minutes, you know exactly what they're thinking. The way they express themselves, the things they stand for. Not all Christadelphians, brothers and sisters. Unhappily, I have to say that. But there are certain people that you know exactly. Because you see them as they are. And you enter into their spirit. You're caught up in that one thing. And there's a witness to you that they're your brother and you're their brother. That's what John is saying, brothers and sisters. And as we take these arguments of our Lord, as he stood in those courts with those Pharisees and listened to that glorious mind reasoning on the Scripture as he did, speaking of things which he knew was way over their head. Not over our head, though. But we can see. Because we've seen him, brothers and sisters. We've handled the word of life and we know where he came from. And we certainly know where he went. And when he ascended up on high, he went back to where he was before. We know what that means. Because we know he was born of God. And we know what that meant to him. What that did for him. It developed that life, brothers and sisters. And it's that life that's the light of men.